the best sports in town, I'm Sean Malone for the New York Post. Well, the New York Yankees' woes continue after dropping Game 3 of their series to the Seattle Mariners yesterday afternoon by a final of 4-0. And to add injury to insult, pitcher Michael King has been placed on the 10-day IL with a right middle finger contusion. The injury, a result of a freak accident. King had his finger jammed between two weights the other day. X-rays were negative on Wednesday, but Thursday, manager Aaron Boone said that he tried to play catch and it was, quote, not good. The news comes after Miguel Andujar sat out Thursday's game with soreness in his left hand and wrist. Now, the Yankees' lack of offense has been well documented this season, and in a column, New York Post columnist Steve Serby writes that the Yankees don't know how to be the comeback kids this season. After all, he's not wrong. The Yankees' inability to produce at the plate has been so consistent this year, it's caused fans to lack faith in the team when they fall behind early in a ball game. Recently, even late-game leads aren't safe, with Aroldis Chapman struggling on the hill, and even the Yankees' $324 million man, Gerrit Cole, has been struggling himself since Major League Baseball began cracking down on sticky stuff. Serby lists 4 Yankee hitters who are underachieving this season and have hurt the Yankees on offense: Gleyber Torres, DJ LeMahieu, Gary Sanchez, and Clint Frazier. Tell us in the poll below who you think needs to turn things around the most in the second half of the season, or comment if you think it's somebody else that we didn't name. The Yankees open up a 3-game series against the Astros tonight as they head into the All-Star break. The aforementioned Michael King was previously mentioned as a possible starter for Game 1. Nestor Cortez will take his place. Gerrit Cole will suit up for Game 2 against his former ball club. And Jameson Taillon will round out the first part of the season for the New York Yankees. Time for a viral video. Check this one out. This video comes from the Scottish Open. Rory McIlroy is chatting with a caddy and fellow golfer John Ram on the number 10 tee box. Enter this clown. This guy comes over, walks over, steals a club straight out of Rory's bag. The three are just stunned, looking at each other, trying to figure out, is this guy with you? No, I thought he was with you. He winds up stepping to the side and taking a few practice swings before security finally steps in and intervenes and removes him from the course. Let's see that again. He tried to take a driver at first, missed it, goes back, takes a totally different club, and nobody does anything. Now, between this guy, the fan who went streaking on the 13th fairway back at the US Open a few weeks ago, the other fan that went streaking at the Super Bowl, and the numerous incidents we've had with fans harassing NBA players this postseason, do we need to have some kind of human resources style training to relearn how to conduct ourselves at sporting events post-COVID? I know we're excited to be back at games again, but come on, people. Get it together, please. That video comes from Duncan Carey on Twitter. If you want to submit a video to us, tweet us at NYPostSports on Twitter with the hashtag #viralvideo. Joining me now is the co-host of the New York Post's own Brooklyn Nets podcast, Full Court on Flatbush, Mr. Robin Lundberg. Robin, thanks for taking the time to join us.
You got it, man.
NBA Finals underway. The Suns took a 2-0 series lead last night, 118-108. Robin, what are your thoughts on the NBA Finals through 2 games thus far?
Well, I mean, look, the Phoenix Suns are a really good team, right? I mean, that's my first thought. Second would be Giannis Antetokounmpo, needs his teammates to step up. He unlike the fans, he can't count on his teammates right now. They're counting when he's at the free throw line. And, part of it's also the fact that these teams were a little bit fortunate to get there the way that they did. Of course, Brooklyn Nets, you mentioned the podcast, Kevin Durant's foot, a couple inches back, and maybe the Nets win that series and the Bucks don't. But nevertheless, the Bucks are a very good team. I expect them to bounce back in Game 3 at home. But Phoenix, you sort of sleep on them a little bit because they were an unexpected 2 seed this year. But that's the kind of team, depending on Chris Paul's future and how long he can play at this level, that's built to last as well. They just have a little bit too much team speed for the Bucks, and some of the coverages that the Bucks have tried to use in the past, aren't working so well because of how good both Paul and Booker are in the mid-range. Those guys are comfortable pulling up and hitting those shots. And unless, Chris Middleton really steps up at home and Drew Holiday shoots the ball better, I just think that the Suns have a little bit too much firepower right now.
You mentioned the future of Chris Paul. That takes us to our back page story today. Get the point. Ian O'Connor writes that while Knicks fans may be dreaming of Dame Lillard, Chris Paul may be the savior the Knicks have been longing for. O'Connor goes as far as to say that Paul could be the Knicks' own Mark Messier and bring a championship back to the Garden. Robin, do you agree with that? Could Chris Paul be the guy they've been waiting for?
Well, look, Chris Paul is the kind of guy every team gets better when he gets there, right? He instills a culture of competitiveness, of leadership, sometimes even rubbing people the wrong way, talks so much, and he commands the offense so much because he's earned that gravitas. But, we've seen it throughout the course of his career, especially recently with teams that surprised. I mean, Oklahoma City a year ago and now Phoenix this year. So I would never criticize a team for bringing Chris Paul in. The only problem is when you are talking about winning a championship, the Knicks are far away from winning a championship. They have solidified themselves and sort of erased some of the joke reputation that they had. And hopefully they're an organization on the come up. But, when you're talking about Chris Paul, there is a expiration date on how long he's going to be able to play at this level. So, of course, if they can bring Chris Paul in to help guide them to the next phase, I'm not against that sort of move. But I think you have to temper the expectations a little bit because what Paul's doing is already defying what we typically see, especially from a smaller guard at this point in a career. And then if I'm Chris Paul and I win a championship with the Phoenix Suns, am I automatically then moving on to another destination, or does that become a new home given, DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker are at the phase of their career where they can sort of take the baton from him and keep the race going?
I mentioned Dame Lillard. Obviously, the Knicks would need to acquire him via trade if they were to get him, which means giving up players. Chris Paul has a player option. So if he opts out, he could sign with the Knicks without them giving up a player. But putting all that aside, assuming you're in charge of the Knicks this offseason and you could get either one of those two players next year, which one would you rather have on the Knicks?
Dame Lillard or Chris Paul?
Dame Lillard or Chris Paul?
Yeah, Dame Lillard. The difference is, look, there's context for everything, right? What do you have to give up to get somebody? Is it just money versus a trade? Dame would be a trade where you're basically tearing apart the core that you built up and cashing those chips in for Dame. But in a vacuum, obviously, given where they're at in their respective careers, you have to go with Dame, and that says nothing about, who's the greater all-time player, just who's older and where they're at. And then, where your potential is for future growth. That has to, you need the context for a conversation like that, because you need to know, is there another free agent the Knicks could agree to if they traded Barrett and other pieces for Dame Lillard and then sign somebody else? Or are you just talking about adding Chris Paul to the existing core? But given, if it's just a one-to-one proposition, you have to take Damian Lillard at this phase of his career.
Now, one final question before you take your GM cap off. The Nets obviously pursuing an NBA championship themselves next year with the big three set to return. One player who missed most of last season is guard Spencer Dinwiddie, who said this on the Crossover pod.
If the Nets come to the table like that and they're being aggressive and they're saying, hey, we got 5-1-25 for you, I would say there's a high likelihood that I go back to the Nets.
And keep in mind that the Nets can also extend Harden, Durant, and Kyrie this offseason. Robin, that's a lot of money. If you're Sean Marks, are you giving Spencer Dinwiddie that kind of a deal?
Well, look, it's not my money. I don't care. As far as how much do they want to go into the luxury tax, that's a separate question. They're already there, right? So that factors in. And then what Dinwiddie would actually command on the market. Are you just going to, what did he say, 5 for 125? Is he going to get that deal from somebody else? But Spencer Dinwiddie's a very good player. You put him into that Nets mix, and he gives you another ball handler. He gives you, another player who can get to the rim, another player who can dribble, pass, multi-threat. He's a decent off-the-catch shooter, not a great three-point shooter in general, but a versatile defender, which would really help them out. So, I think it depends on what what the market looks like, what other offers he gets, and what other options they have. Letting a player of his caliber walk for nothing doesn't exactly behoove you, but is there a sign and trade on the table where they could flip him and bring some assets in? But if you're telling me right here, I can bring Spencer Dinwiddie back just for money, I don't think a fan or somebody who isn't incurring that actual luxury tax, or it isn't, messing up the salary cap for other moves, can say no to something like that. I just imagine you have to see where the market value for Dinwiddie actually is, rather than the value that Dinwiddie is telling you he believes he's worth going in without any negotiation.
Robin Lundberg, co-host of the New York Post's Full Court on Flatbush podcast with former net Kerry Kills. You can find it where podcasts are found. Thank you so much for your time, Robin. I appreciate it.
You got it.
With the best sports in town, I'm Sean Malone for the New York Post.